Hey, welcome back everyone. My name's Ethan. Today I want to talk about how gold can help preserve your wealth over the long run during times of economic trouble, for example, in a recession, a financial crisis, financial downturn of some kind, and how it's shown itself to be a secure store of wealth over long periods of time. Now, I know some people don't really understand gold. They think it's maybe an outdated or outmoded method or way of preserving your wealth, but I don't think that's the case at all. And even in light of more recent types of asset classes that have come around, for example, cryptocurrency, I have a strong belief in the future of cryptocurrency, but I also have a strong belief in the value of gold and assets that have proven themselves to be a secure store of wealth over the long haul, long period of time. And gold is one of those things that has really outlasted pretty much every other type of asset aside from land and real estate, really. But primarily land is the oldest one, and really gold comes in as the second longest method that has been proven, has a long track record of being time-tested way of preserving your wealth. Now, back a couple thousand years ago, like in the medieval times, one of the ways that wealthy people preserved their wealth across generations was something it was called the law of thirds. And I learned about this through a book that Mike Maloney had written. Mike is one of the guys I have immense respect for. He's got a great YouTube channel, so make sure to check that out if you don't know who Mike Maloney is. He also has a book on investing in gold and precious metals. You can find that on Amazon. It's a terrific read. But it was first in his book that I learned about the law of thirds, how wealthy people preserve their wealth in times of crisis. Back in the old days, the way they did this is they would essentially split their wealth in three equal portions, or it might have been more than that, but three main ones, right? And 1/3 of their assets were in land, 1/3 were in art, and the other third was in gold. And the reason for that was very simple. Like back in the day, there was a lot of war, and countries would often fight battles. People would lose land. People there would be economic and political turmoil. And the wealthy people, they wanted to preserve their own wealth, not only for themselves but for future generations. And by using land, gold, and art, they were able to do that. So if the attacking armies are coming on, are just a day or two away, they can put the gold in their saddlebags, take the art out of the frames, roll it up, put that in their saddlebags, and the deed to their land, and they could ride off into the sunset on a horse into a nearby country or somewhere else. And then once the war was over, they could return wherever they went. They could use their art, use their gold to reestablish their wealth, to buy what they needed, whether it was new real estate, new land. They immediately had that with the deed to their land. Then they could go back once the war was over. They could reclaim their land. Obviously, they could take a while to do that, but at least with the deed to their land, they had a chance of getting their land back. But gold played a very important role in the wealth preservation of old, and we still see that today. So a lot of wealthy people, and especially countries, the central banks of countries, they believe in gold. They know that it has intrinsic value to it, and they stockpile gold. So all the central banks of the world, the U.S. and Europe, and China, Russia, basically every country has a store of gold in their central banks, and they do that to essentially act as an asset of last resort. If something goes wrong in their economy with their currency, they have a real asset that they can back up to, that they can lean on, that they can use as a recovery method for their economy and their financial system. And in the news recently, you can see a lot of news articles about countries buying more gold in bulk and also repatriating their gold, which essentially means if they've had gold stored in another country, for example, in the U.S. or in England, they want that gold back home. They want it in their own country's banks. And when they do that, when they repatriate their gold and they buy more gold, it tells me that a couple things. One, they believe in the value of gold. They still do, no matter how outdated or outmoded some people might believe gold is. But the countries believe in it, and therefore that signals to me that it has real intrinsic value there. It also signals to me when they buy more gold and they want their gold back from other countries' banks and deposits in their vaults. They're basically bracing for an economic crisis of some kind, or at least the threat of one. And to me, that signals that I need to up the percentage of gold or the amount of gold I have in my investment portfolio. And that's why I think it has incredible value to so many people. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it, because a lot of people aren't familiar with gold or precious metals in general, what those things can do for people. Most people, don't know a whole lot about investing. When they do know about it, it's usually related to the stock market. Very few people actually branch out and diversify their total investment portfolio among other different types of asset classes, whether that's real estate, cryptocurrency, P2P lending, farmland, or precious metals, or one of the other asset classes that are out there. But this video, I'm talking about the value of gold and what it can do. So I know, and one of the arguments against gold with people who don't like it, they say, well, gold has no intrinsic value. And I disagree with that, because ultimately, the only intrinsic value that anything has in it, whether it's cryptocurrency or US dollars or gold, is just the value of the confidence or trust that we have in any one thing. So we have a certain amount of trust in the US dollar, and a certain amount of trust in cryptocurrency, and a certain amount of trust in precious metals. Precious metals have outlasted every fiat currency like the US dollar ever. They have a long track record of being trusted and having the confidence of people over thousands of years. So gold is that long-term asset of wealth preservation and protection. I sort of view gold in my portfolio as an anchor. An anchor in tumultuous waters of the financial system, and a method of protecting me against the financial tsunamis that can come in the form of a recession or a financial crisis of some kind. So I keep some gold in my portfolio as that anchor, that asset of last resort when everything goes wrong. And then I invest in other asset classes like the stock market or real estate, P2P lending. Those are kind of my main things that I invest in, along with farmland. And I also invest in some things like cryptocurrency that I know are highly speculative, but I think they have a good place in the future. I think they're going to work out in the long run. So I do invest in those as well. I also understand those could go to zero, but I treat precious metals as my anchor. They are there for me. They will help preserve at least a portion of my wealth if everything else goes to hell. And that's why I think it's important for people to understand precious metals, in particular gold, because gold is the gold standard. It has the longest timeline of being viewed as a secure store of wealth for thousands of years. So it's got a long track record. You don't hear a lot about gold in the financial news unless things are going wrong, or unless there's fear of a recession or financial crisis of some kind. But when you do, you start to hear about it. I've got a couple articles here I want to show you about this. One is from CNBC. This is from August of 2019 here, where investors start looking to gold as the fear of recession starts to increase. And so people then in tumultuous times or times where they're fearful will turn to precious metals, especially gold, as a method of preserving their assets. And this is, it's one of those things that that wealthy people, the people who are in the know, people who understand economics and finance, it's the go-to asset when everything else can be in a position where it's going to potentially be in decline. Gold has a really good track record of usually increasing in value during times of recessions or financial crises. And obviously the long-term price of gold, priced in US dollars, can fluctuate all over the place. But ultimately the price of gold is, varies depending on the currency that you're in. We view gold as having a certain price in the US because we see it here priced in US dollars. Somebody in Vietnam is going to see it priced in the currency of Vietnam, or somebody in Europe is going to see it priced in euros. So it has different price points based on where you are in the world and what your local currency is. Ultimately, the value of gold doesn't really change. It's the value of the US dollar or the value of the euro that changes over time. And most people don't really understand that concept. Economics, finance, the monetary system, they are very complex things that most people really don't understand. But it is a really key component of understanding where gold fits in your portfolio, because gold always, if you look at an ounce of gold, that ounce of gold has the same amount of value no matter where you take it in the world. And no matter what what is happening in the world, it always has that same amount of intrinsic value. Now, the amount of dollars or euros that are associated with that value can change over time, but that 1 ounce of gold doesn't change. It's the same format, same weight, same content of precious metal. So everything else fluctuates around gold. Gold is essentially that secure store of value. And it typically does fairly well in times of economic upheaval or recession or financial crisis, whatever that type of financial upheaval or tsunami is in the world. And I think it's super important to include in your portfolio. There are a couple of other articles I think are really important. I'll link to these on my website and in the video about how gold actually preserves wealth. This is an article from Bullion Star where they talk about how gold can help preserve wealth and some of the history behind it. Inc. magazine has an article where they talk about gold as being one of the 5 assets that wealthy people use to preserve their wealth. And you can find these on Google very easily. Just look for how gold preserves wealth, and you're going to find these articles on your own. But I'll just point a couple of these out. There's an article from Forbes, and they talk about how precious metals, are proven to be a good store of value. And that's all these articles. You look at where they're coming from, and you can read them, and you'll see that the cases that are being made for gold. Now, there's always a case against gold that's out there too. But I sort of look at, you can't trust anybody, and I diversify my investments in a hyper diversified manner. Some people probably think I'm crazy for doing that, but ultimately I don't really trust any one person, any one asset, any one strategy, any one company too much. I always try to spread out my risk, but I also take a look at, I don't really care what my friends, my family are saying. I don't really care so much about what the mainstream media is saying, because I know they only really talk about the things that are popular at the moment, or the things that that have a big wow factor that people want to tune in and listen to. I actually pay attention to what the really wealthy people are doing, and I pay attention to what countries are doing and what central banks are doing. And when countries, central banks, and wealthy people are buying precious metals, that's a signal to me that they not only have value, but I should be increasing the amount of precious metals I have in my portfolio. Now, typically, I've heard recommendations from different people that that have said, well, you should keep 3 to 5% of your overall investments in precious metals. I tend to be even more aggressive than that. I usually tend to invest 5 to 10% of my investments into precious metals, primarily gold, some into silver, but primarily gold. So anywhere from 5 to 10%. Kevin O'Leary from CNBC, you'll see him on CNBC every once in a while, but primarily on Shark Tank. That's where he gets a lot of his notoriety from. Kevin O'Leary has been on the record, and you can find videos of him on YouTube being interviewed where he talks about him having about 5% of his total portfolio in gold. Now, he splits that 5% up and puts half of it into secured vaulted storage, and the other half he invests in the GLD ETF in the stock market. And I kind of do the same, although I usually have about 2/3 of my precious metals in secured vaulted storage and about 1/3 in the ETFs. I do use the GLD ETF for some of my investments, but I've started to move towards the ETF that's run by actually the Perth Mint out of Australia, and the ticker symbol for that is AAAU. One of the reasons I like the AAAU ETF is that it's got a lower fee than the GLD ETF, and it is also backed with allocated gold, which means there's actually gold there. It's not a leveraged or a fractional gold behind it. I like AAAU primarily over GLD, but I invest in the ETFs because they're highly liquid. I can easily convert them to cash and use that cash to either buy stocks or buy some other type of asset, or just take it out and spend it on something. I like the liquidity. It's highly liquid when you have it in an ETF. But I leave most of it in secured stored storage, in vaulted storage, and I use primarily for that, and I'll do a separate video on this. I use a site called Hard Assets Alliance, and they essentially do gold storage, where you transfer money into your account, and once it's there, you can buy gold or silver, and you could say, here's where I want to have it stored. I want to have it stored in Switzerland or in Singapore or Salt Lake City or New York, and you get to choose where it's going to be. And then it's stored there. It's got your name on it, or your name is there in some computer system, and they have guards that are securing the vault and protecting it. And it's fairly liquid. It's not as easy to liquidate your precious metals as if you have a gold ETF that you've invested in. You can sell as easily as you would a stock, but it's fairly easy when you invest in Hard Assets Alliance. You'll be able to sell your gold and probably get your money out back into your bank account probably within about a week, maybe a week and a half, since they're waiting for the funds to clear for the gold to be sold and settled. So it's I love it because I don't need to worry about the security risk of investing in physical bullion. I know a lot of people like physical bullion. I don't, just from the standpoint of risk of loss from fire, theft, other things. I don't want the security risk associated with that. Hard Assets Alliance will store everything, they insure it, and it's got your name on it somewhere. So I really like their service. I'll do a separate video on Hard Assets Alliance, but those are two options for buying gold and using that to secure your portfolio. I think it's so important to add gold into your total investment portfolio, just because there are so many signs right now of a recession that potentially is coming. We've been in the longest bull run in the U.S. history ever, and at some point that's going to come to an end. We're going to enter into a recession. Recessions are just a normal part of our economy these days. So it's going to happen. We just don't know when it's going to come, how bad it's going to be, how long it's going to last. But we know it's going to come. And in order to hedge my bets against what might happen, I always make sure I have some gold. I'm actually increasing the amount of gold that I have in my total overall investment portfolio, because I'm going to leverage the assets that I have in gold when the recession comes. And because there are a couple of things that I believe are going to happen that have historically happened during recessions, and one of those is a decline in the stock market, a decline in the prices of individual stocks that you can buy through the stock market. And gold typically goes up in value during a recession, and so I'm going to leverage those price fluctuations between gold and stocks. I'm going to sell some of my gold when it goes up in the next recession, and I'm going to buy more stocks when those go down. That's my belief. That's based on what's happened in the past and what I believe will happen in the future. So that's my plan. And that's one of the reasons I'm increasing my gold assets, my investments in gold, my gold holdings now. Prior to the recession happening, I don't know if it's going to happen in 3 months or 3 years. I don't know. All I know is that I'm putting some of my assets into a fairly liquid store of value that I can convert then to dollars fairly easily, so I can buy stocks or buy other assets, or just use for regular spending. So I believe that gold has a purpose and a value in everyone's portfolio, total investment portfolio. You have to decide if that's something that fits what you want. Again, as I said, I view gold as an anchor. for my financial well-being. I view it as like it is the asset of last resort. When everything else goes to hell, it's still there. I've got at least something in my total portfolio. If everything else goes to zero or near zero, I've got gold there as my anchor, as my final asset of last resort. So anyway, something for you guys to think about. I think gold is so important in today's economic conditions with the risk of recession, a downturn, a financial crisis of some kind. I really think it's important for everyone to consider allocating some of their investments into gold. Ultimately, what you do for your own self, for your own family, has to be up to you. And obviously, I'm not making a recommendation for your particular situation. I just believe it has value, and I think it's valuable for other people to consider adding some gold into their portfolio. But I believe in it. It's been around for thousands of years. Central banks, governments believe in it, even though they don't talk about it really that much. It's there. The gold is there in the vaults, and they buy more in times of perceived economic crisis. So it truly has value. It's been used for value for thousands of years. Someday it might not be, but right now it is still viewed as a secure store of wealth and value. So I believe in it. Many other people believe in it. So it's something I think you should consider adding into your portfolio. Now, there are a number of ways you can buy it. As I mentioned, you can buy physical bullion, and I'll do some reviews as to where you can get that. I'll talk about that in the near future. I'll also cover Hard Assets Alliance, which is what I use primarily. I'm not affiliated with them. I don't get a commission or anything if you guys go there. I just want to point that out because it took me a while to find Hard Assets Alliance, and I want to get the word out about them because I think they have a great service. And you can also buy the ETFs. And there are other companies too that will do sell you physical bullion and do vaulted gold storage. I'll do some videos, some podcasts about those other sources. So check out my other videos, and as those things come out, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I put all the content that I produce out there on YouTube, and I will have more videos out on gold, and I'm going to come out with more videos about how you protect yourself against an upcoming recession, how you can potentially profit from the recession, because I think there are a lot of good opportunities. I used to only be worried about the downsides to a recession, but there are a lot of good things that come out of a recession if you are prepared for it. So I'd like to help people get prepared for it so that they can not only survive it, but they can also use that as an opportunity to build more financial wealth for the future. Anyway, that's it for this video, guys. I really appreciate you guys listening. For you guys watching this video, I wish you guys all the best of luck in anything you're trying to accomplish in life. Health, love, career, finance, whatever it is. I wish you guys all the best. Thank you again so much for watching. Please consider subscribing if you're not already a subscriber. And make sure to just keep watching for videos that I come out, because I've got some things that I think could be beneficial to everyone. Anyway, I will see you guys in the next video. See you around. Bye-bye.